about everybody here that's going to be here. So welcome to one of the financial planning seminars that we have on the campus. Chris Timmick is going to be our first presenter. He is with his realty company called Smart Realty. No,
Timmick Group.
Just changed it this year.
Smart.
Home Smart, Timmick Group. And then Jared, financial planner. Janice, a financial planner, and Josh, a financial planner. So we got lots of people here to plan your financial future. Nothing really in detail, but basically it's about the basics of financial planning, home buying, budgeting, all those types of things, wrapped up into one simple seminar in 55 minutes.
And just so you know, I'm going first, so we always set the bar low.
And they all have this actually, it's Chris, John, and then it's Jared, and it's Janice, and then it's Josh. So everybody has Josh and everybody for blue today. So I'm the only oddball out wearing red. So
however mine works, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So thanks for coming. This will be recorded, and we'll put it up on YouTube for you guys internally to watch, or if you want to watch it with a spouse and say, hey, have we thought about this, or have we done that? I always find that good, just to run it by somebody else. My husband and I were in the car yesterday, and I said, hey, have we thought about what we're doing with our 16-year-old next year about vehicle? He's like, she's going to drive yours. I was like, we're not buying a new car. That's not how this is working. So we had that discussion. That took about 3 hours on our drive. So welcome, and I will let them talk.
Can we all take bets on who won that discussion?
I did.
And I did.
So what part of you were with this?
What do you go ahead and start?
You're ready to start, yes.
Okay, so real quick, my name's Chris Timmick. I'm with the Timmick Group. We're part of Home Smart, just to be clear about how that all works. And real quickly, I wanted to if everybody could just say thanks to Josh. Josh is the food guy. He's actually our thank you, Josh. He brought all the snacks. Josh is actually he does all of my home warranties and that sort of thing. So real quick, if you want to just tell them AHG is the name of their company, and they have different programs. If you're interested, they can be added when you purchase a home. They can be added after the fact. A lot of times, people, again, this being a financial program, it's all about leveraging. How do I manage my money? One of the things you can do is purchasing a home warranty or whatever that might be. I won't give you any numbers. It's based on square footage and the different things you have to do, that type of thing. But you don't have those unexpected big expenses that might come with not having one, for example, okay? And we'll get into that a little bit here in a little while. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna real quickly just talk about, keep in mind, I always dummy everything down to the dumbest person in the room, and that's usually me. So I try to keep it at that level so that it makes it pretty easy for everybody to understand. If you have any questions about anything as I go along, it's really to create interest and just show you what some of the options are. Some of it will apply, some of it may not. There may be something you didn't know about or weren't thinking about, and we'll just go through that. So I'm going to start out real quickly, and when we talk about leveraging, one of the things we want to leverage is credit. So credit scores, everybody always asks, what is it? I'm not a lender, by the way, but these are just things that always come up. What does my credit score do for me? So, excuse me, when you're looking at this, the higher your credit score, the more negotiating power you have with a lender. The lower it is, the less you have. So if I'm in that D credit, let's say 580 to 619, I'm basically looking for somebody who will do the loan, okay? If I go up to say C credit or B credit, now I can start to shop around and I can leverage and get better interest rates, lower closing costs, that sort of thing, okay? So that's how credit can help you in the home buying process. Things that make up, if you want to, and I won't get into credit repair, I don't do credit repair, but just a quick overview of what makes up your credit report and what they look at and the influence that they have. 35% is affected by, as you can see, I'm going to try a pointer. Look at that. So 35% credit history, 30% amounts owed, 15% is length of credit history. One of the things they talk about, and I'll just say this real quickly, when you're buying a house, don't do anything with your credit. Okay, I don't care if it's a commercial building, any kind of investment where you're getting credit, don't change anything, don't buy anything, don't cancel credit cards, be careful paying things off. Talk to your lender, whoever that might be, and ask them if I should do this. Because a lot of times people think, well, I'm going to get this new loan and I'm going to get a new car and the payment's less. All of a sudden, if you do that at the wrong time, that's going to kick your deal out because they go back in and they're looking at your file, and right before they close, they go back and pull your credit again. to make sure you didn't do anything like that, okay? And if you did, they're gonna pull it back out, it's gonna go back into underwriting, and you may be okay, but it could cause a delay, which could cause you money. Deals have fallen out because of that. People have lost homes and investments that way. So be really careful about doing that. Just don't. This is something I didn't know this to be the case. 130-day late payment can drop your score 50 to 100 points in a month or overnight. Some of the things that have changed and what people are looking for and how they're buying has changed as well. Now look at this from two perspectives. Whether you're a millennial or not doesn't really matter. If you're a seller, you want to keep this in mind as well. So a couple of the things that people are doing. People are buying later in life. So millennials, that sort of thing, they are buying, but look at all the rentals, the apartment complexes you see popping up. That's not because people are buying more homes. It's because people are renting or they're renting for longer. So that generation is coming up and they're doing a lot of renting. Part of that is because they saw what happened to their parents in the downturn in 2008 and how they lost a lot of the money they put in. So that philosophy of the, what did they call those, the baby boomers, was put 50% down. 20 was the minimum. I mean, you never thought about putting less than 20% down when you bought a house. Now that's changed. What people are looking for is, first of all, they're looking for smaller homes. There used to be a trend when it was like, let's get a 3,000 square foot home to start, and let's work our way up to a 5,000 square foot home. Now people are doing just the opposite. They're like, how can I get by with 1,200 square feet, 15, 18, and 22 to 2,500 square feet is kind of a big home these days in terms of what people are really looking for. What their objectives are less out of pocket, smaller down payment. This all comes down to keeping more of their money for two reasons. One, it's starting to change. Millennials weren't necessarily as focused on making as much money. They were more about lifestyle, more about travel, that sort of thing. So there was a lot of focus more on that. The other meaning that more on the lifestyle portion than buying a home and having a big home and investing, that sort of thing. And that is starting to change. The other thing is they'll leverage other people's money. And what I mean by that is let's see, going back. For example, let's say, and I'll get into this later, so I just put this back together so the flow of it is, that probably is out of place. We'll get back to that. I'll show you how they're leveraging money. A couple of things for getting more for your home. So now if you're selling, let's say you're downsizing, or maybe you want to upsize. I don't know, you're going from your first home to your next home. How is it that I get more out of my home? It used to be that, and how are we doing on time? Okay, good, still, okay. It used to be that you ask the question, do I leave it as it is and sell the way it is and just sell it for what it's worth? Or do I fix it up? Because can I get my money back, right? That's the question. If I put $10,000 or $15,000 into fixing up the home, do I get that money back? Or am I better off just saying, you know what, I don't want to do it, leave it to somebody else? I will tell you now, the trend is you want to fix it up. And here's why. One, people are finding ways to buy homes, and lenders and appraisers are finding ways to make those homes appraised. If you put money into your home, and it's got to be what people are looking for, so you really need to research what the trends are, kind of the different looks and styles and what's in. Colors are important. I've seen people come in and paint a room that was gray, a lighter shade of gray, like one shade lighter in the house had just been painted. They painted it again. They're very particular, so you got to find those right colors, the right look. That kind of old farmhouse look is really big right now. There's just a lot of different looks that are out there, but it is very much worth it. And why it's worth it is because, going back to what we talked about before with millennials, they don't want to come out of pocket. Buyers in general, even not just millennials, but they're just not wanting to say, you know what, I'll buy the house and I'll fix it up because I can do it cheaper if I do it myself. They're not looking at it that way anymore. They're like, how do I leverage my money? If I can get you to do it and I can pay for it in the house, I'm down. And that's what's selling. I just had a house this weekend that I sold. I put it on the house Friday night. It was under contract by 11 a.m. Saturday morning at full price. So houses are going fast. Now, it does help that we're in a seller's market, meaning that the market's going up and, housing is, the inventory is getting smaller. So from a seller's perspective, it helps. But I will tell you, there's some houses, even in this market, that sit. And it's because they don't take into consideration what people are looking for. Let's see, keep in mind, we're kind of a want it now society. People don't want to wait to do the upgrades later. They don't want the hassles. I think I talked about colors, do what they want, don't go cheap. So some of the leveraging that they're doing, we're going back to, this is part of that other slide. How can I leverage my money? So depending on what you're doing, now the 453-100 is conventional limit, meaning that if you go over that amount, it's considered a jumbo loan. The requirements change when you go into that. We don't have as much of that these days because most people are staying under that number. The hot numbers are somewhere between 250 and 350. That's where stuff's really selling like crazy right now, anything under 350. But there's a lot of options out there. And as you can see, the lenders have started to get and understand that. It didn't used to be that you could go in and put 3% down on a conventional loan. You had to put 20% down, remember? And if you wanted to do less, you had to go find some alternative lender to do something like that. Now you can put 3% down. There's even a 1% down program where the lender, get this, will pay the other 2%. So you actually put 3, but the lender paid for 2 of it. So you get 3% in equity into your home. So now you've got lenders that are paying you to do their loans. That's how competitive it's getting. And that's why they also understand that people don't want to put a lot of money down. And homes are getting more expensive. The higher the interest rate goes, the higher the down payment goes, the less home that people are going to be able to afford. So the lenders are getting creative again. How do I get people into homes? Some of these will require, whoa, there you go. Learn how to work your, you shouldn't be giving me this thing.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, here's where we were. They even have zero down VA and government down payment assistance programs. So let's say you're going in, now there's some minimum requirements around credit score. They're not that high, it's like 640 or 660, something like that. So that was in that, I think it was C credit area. But you can actually go in, if you have a VA, if you're a vet, you can go in zero down, right? The other thing you can do is they have government down payment assistance programs. And those are really good in the sense that what people are doing, and millennials or anybody is actually doing, if you qualify, there's some maximum income, household income requirements, that sort of thing, or limitations, I should say. But what's great about these loans is they give you the down payment. I'll give you an example. My son bought a house in December, okay? He got, I think it was close to $8,000 for his down payment. All he had to do was come in with his closing costs, which part of that was covered by the lender. We built some of it into his loan. He came in and he only put like $3 grand down. He bought a brand new home. That was his total out of pocket. So we're getting really creative now. There's a lot of things you can do. If you have a good agent that knows how to write contracts that way, it can be done through your lenders, through your title. There's just a lot of different options available, okay? Seller paid closing costs. That was kind of the contract part I was talking about. You can get, sometimes sellers will pay for part of your closing costs. So I don't know, anybody know that? You didn't know that? I told you that's the dumbest guy in the room. Buying a second home. This is really big right now. People are trying to figure out, how do I do that? If I want to buy a vacation home up north or something like that. What you can do is you can use equity from your existing home as a down payment, so you can pull that out. They're back to doing different types of loans, HELOCs, different things like that. So you want to talk to your lender about what's available and what works best for you. But those are available. Let's see. If you want to straight out buy one, they can do loans where it's called 90% LTV, which means they're only putting 10% down into the home. So they do have programs, again, for second homes. That's kind of unheard of. It used to be you had to put 35 to 40% down. So again, lenders are loosening up the guidelines. Here's actually something that's pretty interesting. Recent graduates. If you're a recent graduate, you can use your official school transcripts, as you can see, an employment letter for 2-year employment history, because you have to have that employment history to be able to get a loan, okay? You now can use, so again, they're getting creative, those transcripts as part of your employment history, okay? You can also gift funds from a family member for down payment, so that is allowed. It has to be from a family member and it has to be a gift. It cannot be a loan, okay? if you're getting a new job or expecting a raise of some sort, this is actually really good. So let's say you get a new job, you're like, oh, I want to buy this house. Now I can buy the one I want. I just got promoted. Tanya retired. I've got her job now. Tanya's like, yeah, thumbs up. But here's what's great about that. If you look in this program, as long as you don't, so what happens is this. So in a new job, you're getting, well, this is new to me actually. This is something I just found out about, so I'm going to read this along with you. You can raise it, if you get a cost of living increase, new home, you can actually purchase it and use that raise, that amount of money that you will be getting. As long as you get it within 60 to 90 days of closing, you could count that part of your raise into your income. Does that make sense? Am I saying that the right way? Okay, great. Any questions on that? No? Good. Okay, investors. This is actually, if any of you who have considered buying an investment home, how do I do that? What does that look like? Without getting too deep into it, I just want to give you, kind of a quick overview, and then we'll move on to Jared. You can finance up to 10 properties. I know that seems like a small or a lot, but you'd be surprised as people get in and you want to have a plan, okay? So when you're doing this, a lot of times people just think, well, I'm going to buy a second home, and they don't think anything about what investing means, what's involved in that. One of the things I will let you know is you need to get clarity around what it is you want, what your path is, where you want to go with your investing. But you can finance up to 10 properties, which you didn't used to be able to do. There were some limits around that. So anybody that's looking and says, hey, I want to build a real estate empire, you can do that through residential real estate. You can also do a refinance. You can pull out 75% of the appraised value of the home. So let me give you a scenario. Let's say I bought a wholesale home. You can buy things through the auction. Let's say I bought it for, I don't know, $100,000, okay? If it comes back, and I let's say I purchased it, say, through a hard money or cash or anything like that, okay, I paid $100,000 for it. If it comes back and that house is worth $200,000 because I got a really good deal on it, I could get a loan for 75% of that amount. So I could actually get a loan for more than I paid for the home because they're basing it on the current appraised value. Does that make sense? Okay. You can also do, and this is something more, I'm just going to kind of as a tickler for Jared, we'll talk more about this, but you could do some 401k and trust investing. For example, if you had a $150,000 purchase, possible rent of $1,300, that's actually old, that would be more today, like $1,500 or $1,600. But it would give you a possible gross return of about 10% on your money versus some other options. I'm not telling you not to invest in the stock market or anywhere else. I'm just saying, here's a scenario where it could make sense for you to take some of that money if you're like, well, I don't know where to put it, or maybe some other things that you invest in aren't looking very good right now. You don't want to be in cash. Sometimes there's an option for you to be able to invest in real estate. And that's an example, and we could get more into that later if that's something you're interested in. If somebody wanted to do commercial, I don't know how many of interested in this, but to give you an example, let's say you bought what they call a triple net shopping center. Basically, that would be any of these strip malls that you see around. What's interesting about those is the return is really good on them. They're really not much different than buying a home. It's just, it's a commercial property. You have a management company that handles it, but the process is pretty much the same, and we help you through that. Essentially, the way it works is, let's say you bought $1 million property, however you paid for that. And there's options around that we would actually guide you through. Minus your expenses. So it gives you, when you take your gross income and you subtract all your expenses out of it, it gives you what they call NOI, which is your net operating income. When you take your net operating income and you divide it by your purchase price, it gives you a cap rate. So a solid cap rate in today's market is 7%. So if you had $1 million property with a 7% cap rate, you generate about $70,000 annually in net income. Now, if you have debt on that, you would have to service the debt out of that amount. But if you pulled it from a product of your own 401k or something like that, you can talk to Jared about what those terms look like and how you pay that back. So just to give you kind of some ideas about commercial, I just wanted to touch on that. May not be something that's of interest to you. That's it for me. Any questions? No? I did such a great job in explaining it all. Yes.
Do you see that the prices of houses are continuing to go up?
Yes.
Do you see us headed towards another dump like we did in 2008?
Well, here's what I've heard. So I'm not one of the analysts that studies that. But what I have been told by the builders who control all the permits, and they're the ones buying them, the next 2 years are going to be solid. Beyond 2 years, they're not really sure. They're projecting about 4% over the next 2 years. Build permits are still really high right now. What I'm hearing from the doomsdayers, if you will, is that most of it, if there is a downturn, it won't be like it was then, because the growth is sustainable. If you remember leading up to 2007, 8, and that time frame, homes were growing at 10, 15, 20, and 30% a year. Right now, they're growing at about from 4 to 7. So it's a much healthier, sustainable growth that the market can typically sustain and it'll support. But if you look at the other thing is people are having to actually qualify for the loans now. We're back in 2005, you didn't. I mean, if you had a pulse, literally they gave you a loan. they did, and it was crazy. I had people, and what that does is it brings people into the market that don't have any idea how to invest. So, any other questions? Yes.
A lot of newer homes, new builds,
Mhm.
they're still really large, 3,000 square feet more. Is there going to be a trend for smaller homes? Like you were saying, like a lot of people look for smaller homes, 1,100, 1,200 square feet, but it doesn't seem like the builders are catering to that at all.
So depends on where you go. Some of like we just went to a community, like if you look around in between the communities, they usually do a blend. Okay. So for one thing, so it depends on the builder. It also has a little bit to do with the city, because the city will mandate to some degree the size of the homes that you have to build. So for example, let's say you wanted to put all multifamily, which you could put, 40, 50 homes on an acre, within, an apartment complex, or even do really small homes. The town will say, you know what, we don't want all of that. We want to see some bigger homes with bigger yards, because they don't want to be known for just the small homes, small yards. They want to have housing for the entire market. They want it to be a mix. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they require the builders to do so many of each size, and it varies by builder and city and that sort of thing. Queen Creek's doing quite a bit of. They're doing both. I mean, they are. My son just bought one. It was 1,600 square feet out there, and they were all about that size. But within that, there were some 3,000 square foot homes.
Yeah.
So they're out there because there are still families that need that. They're just typically getting by with less. So, any other questions? Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I hope there was at least some interest in there and answered a few questions. If you want to know any more about any of this, let me know. And now I want to go ahead and bring Jared up, and he's going to talk to you a little more about the financing, the investing end of it. Do this? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate that. So I have a quick story about AT Still. I've never been on your campus before. They've never let me, so thank you for letting me come. First and foremost, I suppose. But I actually had a friend, a good friend of mine, who was going to dental school here, and so we went over to his house, and on his kitchen table, he had a beef tongue or a cow tongue, right? And he was practicing injections into the tongue, which was, kind of grossed me out. But I suppose, I'd rather practice on a cow, I suppose, than myself. So, anyway, so this is our company, and certainly thank you for letting us come out here today. This is kind of our boring stuff, but it's certainly something that we hold really true to ourselves, our mission and our vision here. And this is one that if we say that one of the things that we try and be the most, it's that we are the most trusted and referred financial services company. The reason that we say that is because we recognize that finances are very important to you. And so if you can trust us, then we hope that you would refer us in addition. So, but we hold that responsibility very seriously. So this is, when we talk about financial planning or anything along those lines, our company refers to it as a financial journey. And the best analogy that we compare it to is really going hiking. And the highest pinnacle for most climbers is Mount Everest. Has anybody watched any movies or documentaries on Mount Everest? Yeah. I have watched more than my fair share, and I have no desire to ever do it, because I sit there and look at that, and But there's a couple of interesting things, and I just want to point out some of the statistics here. So the statistics are the youngest person ever to climb Mount Everest was 13 years old. Oldest person was 80. There have been over 4,000 people that have reached the summit. The summer temperatures fluctuate between -4 and -31 degrees, right? So it's breezy, you know, and then it's the highest mountain peak in the world. Now, what was interesting that I didn't know beforehand was that you don't just climb to the top of Mount Everest. I didn't find this out until I actually did some studying. They actually have different base camps that they go. This base camp here starts, you have to hike, it's a 3-day journey just to get to the base camp. And then what you end up doing is there are essentially 4 different camps up to the Mount Everest, but you don't just go from the bottom to the top right from the start. What you have to do is you start at base camp, go from base camp to camp 1, back to base camp. Base camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 1, back to base camp. And you do that process over and over. It's actually a 3-month process for someone to actually go to the top of Mount Everest. Now, why do you think that that is? Yeah, acclimating yourself in order to do it. So what we talk about is the analogy that we draw in this, if you use this on kind of a retirement or just wealth planning in general, if someone was to go right from the top to the very bottom, or be dropped off on a helicopter on the top of Mount Everest, what would happen to them? Die. Yeah, I know I probably would, right? I'm not in the medical profession, but I assume that that's what would happen. What happens statistically to most people that win the lottery? They go broke, right? The statistics are overwhelmingly high. So this is one of those things that when we say, look, your financial journey and your overall financial planning and everything, it's a process. It's a process to where you go up and you go down. I had one guy that told me, well, I'll get into that a little bit, but it is a process that you have to go up and you have to go down and you have to learn and continue to become comfortable with wealth, and everybody is in a different spot. And the reality is that everybody's Mount Everest, the top of Mount Everest, is different, right? So every single person has a unique vision of what they want their retirement to look like. So here are just some boring, scary retirement statistics. And there's too many of these out here, so I won't, there's too many of these on the internet, but I just want to point out a couple of them. 36% of retirees depend solely on Social Security. 88% of Americans are worried about maintaining a comfortable standard of living in retirement. Medicare only covers 62% of medical expenses, resulting in $218,000 in expense over 20 years. So it's this interesting dynamic that's taking place because everybody at some point wants to retire. That's not the question. The question is how do they prepare in order to get to where they want to be? And so we look at this as this is an ongoing process, and every single person that goes into this has their own unique plan, their own unique journey. And that's why when Chris and I were talking, if real estate is a part of that plan, absolutely. Right? Absolutely, you do it. Absolutely engage in that process. Whatever those components are of your plan, then all of that stuff goes to the same, because the reality is that you're trying to get up here, wherever that looks like. This is the way that our firm kind of breaks everything down. We really say there's 3, this is our logo. There's really 3 main phases of financial planning for people in every single situation. So phase 1 is where we're climbing the mountain. Phase 2 is where we're reaching the summit. So that's typically people that are about 5 years into retirement. And then phase 3 is what we call navigating the descent. What's more dangerous, climbing up Mount Everest or climbing down? Down, right? And so that's where it's no different in here. Now, that's it, just slide. There you go. Just grab a sled and go from there. But this is where we think that this planning part is incredibly important. And one of the things here that it's in our logo is that we have this little downturn because life happens. People get laid off, children get sick, spouses get sick, different things happen, markets crash, economies crash. All of these sorts of things happen, but that does not change what you want to ultimately do. So no matter where you're at within this process, it's a planning process that continues to go through everything. I had somebody that told me, when we say climbing the mountain, if you remember, you had to hike how many days to get to base camp on Mount Everest? 3 days. So a lot of times we associate this with an age, and we'll say, oh, that's traditionally people that are, you know, in their early 20s or sometimes just starting to get this. I had a gentleman that came to me who was 45, he's clearly in phase 1, and he said that he's ready to be an adult, right? He's ready to begin taking his finances seriously. That's the reality. This is not age specific, with the exception of maybe this one, just because there's some critical decisions that need to be made before retirement that can have a pretty drastic impact on everything else. So this is where we talk about a lot of different financial, when you say the word financial planning, it encompasses so much that it becomes really difficult to even understand what it is and what it isn't. We believe that there has to be a healthy combination between equipment and tools and skill and technique, and we equate that to products and strategy, right? If I went to REI, and that's the only hiking place I know of, right, that sells hiking equipment, but bought all of the gear to go climb Mount Everest, what do you think my chances of them are making it? I'll tell you, 0. I'm dead. Right? Even if I went and bought all of the most expensive gear that I could possibly afford, on my own, I would not be able to do it. But then I also have to have the skill and technique, somebody that's on the other side. So we become really product agnostic, right? We don't really care what the product is. We just care how it fits into the overall planning process. This is where we recognize that there needs to be an efficient process all along these different decisions. So if the goal is to buy a home, or if the goal is to retire at 65, or if the goal is to retire at 55, if the goal is to buy a castle in Europe, or if the goal is to go on a vacation to a castle in Europe, those are all different plans, right? And what ends up happening is that you need to be within each one of those decisions, ensure that it's the most efficient decision, that it's still allowing you to get to where you want to be. So what we do is in this one, you know, one of the things that happened when the real estate market crashed, right? What did that do for people that were able to buy? What's happened since the market's crashed? It's gone up, right? The real estate market has gone up. And so that created these opportunities for people that were able to do that. So what we try and do is we balance essentially what those different strategies are going to be. And then on the product side, we just continue to look at it and say, is that going to allow you to get to where you want to be? And then the most important thing, reducing your risk along the way on that when we're talking about phase 2, when people are within 5 years worth of retirement, well, at that point, we need to preserve that estate, right? Because at that point in time, if there was a downturn, that can have pretty dramatic impact on what somebody's planning to do with the rest of their life. So this is where we talk about the impact of the real rates of return. And I won't go into this a lot, but this is some of the boring math stuff that some people really enjoy, myself as one of those. But I just want to point this out. Does anybody know what the 20-year return of the S&P 500 is? The average rate of return? What would you guess? If you had to pick a number to guess, what would you say? 5%?
6.25.
6.25? That's pretty specific.
$1.
$1. That's Price is Right. It's actually 9.91%, right? So 9.91%, I think it'd be fair and safe if I just rounded that up to 10%, right? Would that be a fair thing to do? So 10%, if that's the average rate of return, is that what actually took place? No, why? Someone, yeah, that's the average over 20-year span. So this is purely just to show you, if somebody was to, in theory, if somebody had $1 million, they took out an average income of $100,000, right? Because they could, according to that theory, The market's averaging 10%, they could still do that, pull that out. Well, what ended up happening, this is if somebody was to retire in 1997, again, the reason we started in 1997, those are the 3 best years back-to-back returns over the period where they've been tracking this stuff. So you started off with the 31%, 26%, 19.5%. So back-to-back-to-back years, you started off really well. So if you started off really well, so according to here, the plan's going great, right? Plan's working. It's not until really, look at what happens when the market crashed in 2007, right? So we have these back-to-back years that are downturn, right? In 2008 or 2007 to 2008, this killed you. So your portfolio went from $757,000 down to $273,000, right? Now what's happening in that situation? You're now 10 years older and 10 years out of the work environment, right? According to this situation. So this is where we go and we say, if I haven't put in the numbers here, but if this was still in plan, you still have money in place and you're still able to draw your $100,000. Now think of this with me, if you will. So this was somebody retiring in 1997. Think of the same person or his coworker said, you know what, I'm going to work to the end of the millennium. I'm going to work until 2000. Do you think there are some thoughts that were going on? I'm going to start off the new millennium as a retired person and I'm just going to enjoy life, right? Look what ends up happening in this situation. Same scenario. Somebody retired, same $1 million, still wanted to take this out. They didn't even get to this because the markets don't average 20 or 10% each year. Markets go up and down, right? And so this is one of those things, at this point, they're out of money within 10 years. And this is where the panic starts to set in. So this is where we begin to say, because of this and because the markets go up and down and there's a lot of speculative in nature, what's going to happen in the market, in the real estate market, right? Even the best analysts are sometimes wrong. So I appreciate what Chris is saying and I appreciate where those reports are coming in. But if you ask somebody if the market is going to go up or higher, no matter what you say, you're going to get 2 opinions and they're both going to use the same information and draw different conclusions. So the crystal ball of what's going to happen in the market is something that you need to continue to think about. So what people end up doing, they say even if the market historically averages 10%, the number that you can actually draw on that income is, what would you guess? 3 to 4%, right? Because they say markets go up and down. So right now, again, because what ends up happening, if somebody is retiring and their market's fully invested in the market, that could actually be a problem, right? Because that's not in their best nature, right? They're probably becoming more conservative in nature. So what they end up saying is that the inefficient planning process, they'll say rather than being able to take out that 10% distribution, you can only take out 3 to 4% of those funds. So what we really try and do on our firm is we try and say, if we can create a more efficient planning process, we can take that same $1 million and we can just increase that to 7 to 10% distribution rate, right? So this is what we end up doing. This is just a blueprint. What it allows us to do is just to kind of take an overall snapshot of where somebody's at. Number one, where they want to go. But this is what's really the most important thing. And this is something that if you're already doing this, I would encourage you to continue to do it. But it's every single one of you has your individual plan, right? Your individual, where you want to go, what you want to have happen. And be thinking about what that plan includes. We believe strongly in an approach called goals-based investing and goals-based planning. So what that means is, do we try and be as efficient as possible in our investments? Absolutely. But we also try and balance it, right? We try and sit there and say, what's a risk worth taking? What's a risk not worth taking? And going back and forth. And more importantly, what are you trying to do, right? So some people, they want to send their kids to college, right? That's a pretty safe thing, but what's happened, and look, I want to be clear, the cost of college is absolutely worth it, but what's happened to the cost of college? It's gone up, right? And so as it's gone up, now from the planning perspective, from parents planning to pay for their kids' schooling, that has continued to get higher. So you need to create plans that say, how are we going to accomplish this? If the plan is to save for a retirement home or for a vacation home, okay, how does that fit into the overall plan? If the plan is, hey, I'm not that 3 to 4%, that $30,000 to $40,000 scares me to death, I need to try and increase that number, how do I do that? If somebody is in phase 2, right, approaching that retirement age, well, then they're going to make some critical decisions with their Social Security. So Social Security optimization and kind of understanding, if you take Social Security at 62 compared to 70, there's a pretty drastic difference. And that's a lifelong decision that's going to happen. And then the final one is just long-term care planning. This is something I'll go into on another slide here. One of the things I want to emphasize is we believe strongly, again, that we're product agnostic. So what that means is that I don't care what the product is. I care what it's trying to do. And one of the reasons I believe that is because if I'm a guy that only has a hammer in my toolbox, well, guess what? Everything looks like a nail, right? So I'm going to start swinging. But what ends up happening with us, our toolbox is really big, right? Our toolbox, and that's, you want somebody that has a toolbox that allows you to do a bunch of different things, because it's going to allow those options and your individual plan to be very important. This is something that's, if somebody talks, so I do a lot of planning with parents in college, and then I used to work with pretty exclusively with attorneys. So attorneys would come out of college and they would have significant amounts of debt. And so again, in their decision-making process and in their planning process, they are asking themselves, do I pay down my student loans, or do I buy a house, or do I buy my own practice, or do I do all of those different decisions? All of these sorts of things kind of fit now into that picture that we continue to think about. This is something that's just important that I just wanted to highlight, because we're talking, and this is specifically about student loans, because we're talking about the FAFSA application and a lot of those sorts of things, it's important to understand how that's compromised, right? All of the government's data essentially goes into one giant formula. And if you understand kind of what's in that formula, that's critically important, because that can help somebody go through their different plans. And then this is a final one. Long-term care, again, is really expensive. This is from a recent article. These are government statistics, so these aren't from me that I've provided. These are from government. So they're saying a 65-year-old couple will pay on average $395,000 in long-term care expenses. And then a 55-year-old couple will plan on paying $464,000. So the U.S. Department of the Actuary, which probably has the most boring Christmas parties ever, right? But what they're planning on is that there's a 6% increase inflation rate that's going to be taking place on healthcare expenses, right? So look, if we know that this is out there, if we know that this is what the current market environment is, then we just need to plan. We just need to understand, what is it that we're trying to accomplish in the next 3 years? What is it that we're trying to accomplish in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and all of those sorts of things, and what does all of that look like, and how can we be most efficient with that process? So that's all I have. This is where we, again, this is not necessarily, I just would encourage you to talk with a planner. If you don't currently have one, we would love to sit down and talk with you, or if you're looking for a second opinion, we would love to do that as well. But it's critically important, because without having a plan, there's so much information out there that it's really hard to make sense of everything. So I just really encourage you to do that. And again, thank you so much for
you think the best thing for, what do you think the best thing for people to do leaving here would be? Start with their budget, start with their goal, what mean?
So people in here right now?
Yep.
Yeah, I think most importantly, first and foremost, is it's a goal planning session, right? So it's what are you trying to accomplish? And what we end up doing, if we can find out what you want to accomplish, then we can find out where you're at, then the budget fits into all of that. And then all of those decisions continue to play into one another. And again, I use this analogy, right? And I hope that it's effective. I don't know that haven't thought of a better one, I suppose. But there's a clear difference between somebody that wants to buy a castle and somebody that wants to go on vacation there. Does that make sense? And so the planning process, finding out what those are, and then kind of backtracking and finding out is important.
What do you charge for services, and does it vary on your needs as far as the charges, or what is our consultation?
Yeah,
company, or-
so consultations are always free. And then we will go over kind of what the overall, so that planning process is always free. And that's, again, we do that just that takes about an hour. And again, that's just a matter of finding out what it is that you want to accomplish and then where you're at within that plan. Typically, we don't charge fees for a plan specifically. If there are various products that we're compensating on that, but all that stuff would be known upfront before making decisions. Sure. Any other questions? Okay. Well, certainly. Thank you so much. We'll be here. I didn't even mention this. I apologize. Janice is with me. So Janice is somebody that, if I can real quick, I apologize, but Janice is somebody that is wonderful, has an economics-based background, so she understands, the economic side of things, but she also has her husband as a doctor and has kind of gone through some of those same decisions as well. So huge resource for us. So thank you so much. Certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. So,